while your day is winding down. They're just getting started. This is South Coast Tonight with Chris McCarthy and Marcus Farrow. They've got you covered on all the news of the day, from local issues to politics on both sides of the aisle. This is the place where the movers and shakers come to be heard, to listen, and where they're held accountable. This is South Coast Tonight on WBSM.
Welcome to South Coast Tonight. I'm Marcus Farrow. 508-996-0500 is how you can join me this evening. We can also take your messages on the WBSM app. It's a big night tonight in the New Bedford City Council. That's going to be a primary area of our focus, but I also want to turn to something that happened in the Supreme Court that has a local focus as well, and we'll talk about that. But 508-996-0500. That's how you can join me, and we'll take your messages on the app chat. What's happening now is the city council is just starting their meeting, right? I'm sure the gavel has been struck, and the meeting is beginning. And in that meeting is going to be the veto override votes on the 3 ballot questions. Now, if you're a regular listener of South Coast Tonight, or really any of our programming here at WBSM, you're probably familiar with the vetoes, with the 3 ballot questions the city council proposed. But let's go over it anyway for background. There are 3 questions that were, I think, last month put up for a vote. One of them, the first one, and the one that's probably generated the most conversation, is the one on rent stabilization, or as some call it, rent control. There's been a lot of debate about the language that's used to describe it, but rent state was some sort of rent restriction, and it's asking the voters. The question purports to ask the voters whether or not New Bedford should enact a rent stabilization ordinance. That was proposed by New Bedford City Council Shane Burgo. Shane is he's made housing a signature issue of his first term, and probably throughout his next terms as well if he's reelected. He's the co-lead of the home group. He is the chair of the housing committee in the city council, and he actually first proposed this question here on South Coast Tonight, the ballot question. Rent stabilization has been a hot topic lately because Boston passed a rent stabilization ordinance. The rub is, any rent stabilization ordinance, like the one in Boston, or like one that New Bedford would have proposed, would have to get approved by both chambers of the state legislature and then signed by Governor Healy. But this question just wants to ask people whether or not they should ask the public whether or not they should move forward with it. They want to ask the public that question. So the second I see some calls on the line, we'll get to them in a minute. 508-996-0500. You know what? Let's go. Let's do it now. Why not? Good evening. Hello.
Yeah, Marcus.
What's up?
Yeah, are you aware of the ruling that just came down from the Superior Court on the sheriff's office?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, you need to look at the article. It just came out. It's I guess Sheriff Hodgson, the inmate suicide thing. It's on masslawyerweekly.com.
Okay.
And it's a big article, and it just came out that the Bristol County Sheriff's Office was found to be responsible for not preventing the suicide and all that. It's quite a big, extensive article.
Oh, man. All right. I'm going to check that out on the next break. I appreciate you bringing that to me. No, I was not made aware of that. So
yeah,
I really appreciate that. So they're saying that they're responsible for a particular suicide or a few suicides?
Yeah, I guess the way the article read was that the civil rights attorneys and mental health advocates, filed a lawsuit, and I guess they won it. You know what I mean? So you read the article. It's quite a big article. It's on It's on that site, masslawyersweekly.com.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the mag. It's a magazine.
I think it would be being a lawyer.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to check that out. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay, take care.
All right, so that's something we can definitely talk about too. Looks like there's a lot happening. So we'll get into that when I have a chance to just look it over, which I probably will during the break. Just get at least a cursory read of it. I reached out to the sheriff's office spokesperson to see if we can get some background on it as well. Maybe we can get the sheriff on if he has any opinion on it as well. We'll work on that. We'll work on that, but I appreciate that. We've got a great audience, a really attentive, well-read audience, and I appreciate them bringing stories like that are really important. Obviously, we're following, and you're following everything that's been going on at the Bristol County Sheriff's Office now that it's under new leadership with Bristol County Sheriff Paul Heroux. And one of those issues, that was talked about was during the campaign was inmate suicides. There was a suicide that happened during the campaign, and another attempted suicide that had occurred at the same time at the Ash Street Jail. And then a few days into Sheriff Heroux's tenure, there was also another suicide at the Dartmouth Jail. All of them, the one at Ash Street was a suicide by asphyxiation and with the use of toilet paper. The other one was a suicide by hanging that had happened in the Dartmouth Jail, the one that happened under Sheriff Heroux in his first few days in office. So we'll look into that. We're gonna take a look at that when I get more information, more context. We can definitely talk more about that. But just a little background again on those ballot questions, because there was a rally at City. Actually, going back to the rent stabilization ballot question, there was a rally outside of City Hall. Adam Bass is on the scene. He was reporting. He had taken some pictures. I saw, obviously, Councilor at Large Shane Burgo was there. Eric Andrade, who had organized the rally, a local community activist. Marlene Pollock of the Coalition for Social Justice I saw there. I saw Rich Drolet, who's the chair of the City Democratic Party. So looks like there's some prominent figures in local politics there, local Democratic/progressive politics. Organizing that rally. And by what Adam told me, he estimated about 50 to 60 people. So that's a lot. And it looks like Shane spoke at the rally, too. Adam should have shared a picture of Shane speaking to the crowd. 508-996-0500. That's how you can join us this evening. We can take your messages on the app chat. So other than the rent stabilization question, there was the Community Preservation Act question. I would say this one got a lot of buzz as well. We talked about it at length, the CPA and the Community Preservation Act, which is, if you're not familiar, it's a state law where communities that opt into the Community Preservation Act, and they have to opt in through a ballot referendum, they basically, it's a 1.5% surcharge on your property taxes. Fairhaven has CPA. I sat on the Fairhaven CPA committee for a bit. Dartmouth has, we did a lot of good work there too. Dartmouth does a CPA as well. There's a lot of communities around here that do CPA. I think all of them do, except for maybe one or two, like in the South Coast, maybe like Rochester, somewhere in the Tri-Town, I think. I might be wrong, but you can correct me if I am. But basically, it's a 1.5 surcharge on property taxes that goes into a fund, and that gets, right now, as of recently, gets about a 40% match from the state. There's also, and those go to fund projects in three areas: historical preservation, open space and recreation, so like public parks, stuff like that, and housing, which obviously is the issue of the day in terms of, local, really national issues, but obviously a very local issue. Not just in New Bedford, but throughout the South Coast. We need more housing here in Fairhaven. Dartmouth's building some housing now. Dartmouth's been better at it, I think, than Fairhaven has in terms of the surrounding communities. They're building some housing too. You just saw, I don't know if you saw that. Looks like the old Allendale Country Club is going to be a housing development. Actually, they're going to build some housing units there. The property was sold for $3 million. There's a story on WBSM and Fun 107. I believe Michael Rock wrote the story. But I couldn't believe the pictures I saw of Allendale, because I used to go there for parties and stuff like that, and it was, nice place. And it's been, for lack of a better term, abandoned. And it very much looks abandoned. So that looks like it's going to be repurposed. So that question was put forward by Council President Linda Morad. She said she'd gotten some phone calls from the residents saying that they're upset about the surcharge. No other city councilor said they got those phone calls. There's been some city councilors that have been more vehemently, I think, vocally opposed to the CPA ballot question. Because, the argument is basically it does a lot of good and necessary work. You think of all of the housing units that are coming online, the new housing units have access CPA funds. There's, work that's done in Buttonwood Park and Brooklawn Park and, the New Bedford Art Museum, the Whaling Museum. A lot of that's being done with CPA funds, as well. So a lot of good essential work, is being done. And there's talk about, trying to leverage more of that money for housing development projects, because you basically, I think you got to do 50% for those three areas: historical preservation, open space and recreation, and housing. And there's another 50% that you can sort of just use how you want. And I know that there's been some councilors that have argued that some of that 50% should be used exclusively for housing after the three areas are met with the rest of the allocation. So that they're basically, that's another non-binding question. All these questions are non-binding, by the way. Basically asking the residents, should they repeal it? It was passed by a ballot referendum in 2015 here in New Bedford, or 2014, not fairly recently, within a decade. I know some people who actually went out and canvassed for it, mobilized for it. Some former local elected officials told me that, actually. I was talking to former Ward 3 Councilor Hugh Dunn. At the time, I think he was working for Bill Keating. He organized some canvassing for that, as well as other very, very prominent local officials, to try to get the CPA passed in New Bedford. So that's been a topic of discussion as well. That ballot question is also up for the veto override. The third ballot question is whether or not they should move the mayoral term from 4 years back to 2 years. So it was 2 years for a long time. It was recently in 2017 made to be a 4-year term by ballot referendum. Now, this ballot referendum was petitioned by members of the community, and then, there was a serious, campaign effort behind it. A lot of local business leaders and community leaders had really pushed hard for it. I remember it was called Forward, but Forward, F-O-U-R, Forward, not F-O-R. So that is up for, that is a question that's before the council as well, because Mayor Mitchell vetoed all three of these ballot questions. So now the vetoes are up for, it takes it's a process. It's called spread, or you got to spread them, or whatever it's called. I forget. Linda Morad, when she's on with Tim tomorrow, will probably explain that process more thoroughly. But those three ballot questions are up. Now, they all passed with relative ease last time. They all passed with relative ease last time. But now, after there's been some discussion, some public discussion, the mayor vetoed. The ballot question had a very stern, I would say scathing rebuke of those ballot questions and the process to which they were put forward, saying there was little public debate, no committee process, and no one talked to him about it. And it feels like something that, the mayor should have probably been looped in on. So, despite the fact that they were passed with relative ease in that last meeting, a lot of councilors have had the opportunity to reconsider their position publicly and have publicly said that they are voting the other way. They're voting to sustain the mayor's veto and keep those questions off the ballot. They cite their reasons. Scott Lima came out with a press release today on the rent control question, saying he's going to vote against putting that question on the ballot. So he's going to vote to sustain the mayor's veto. He also said he's going to vote to sustain the mayor's veto on the 4-year, the switch from 4-year to 2-year terms. I know that Councillor Abreu has been opposed to all 3 ballot questions at the outset. Councillor Lima was always against the CPA ballot question. I've spoken with some councillors off air about it, just to get a temperature check of where they're at. And some councillors have publicly said they're going to vote against certain ballot questions. I know Maria Giesta had texted into Barry's show about 3 weeks to a month ago, but said that she was going to vote to sustain the mayor's veto on the CPA question and vote to sustain his veto on the 4-year to 2-year mayoral term question, and that she's still considering the rent stabilization ballot question. So, but just based on conversations I've had with some councillors, based on some councillors publicly coming out against some of these ballot questions, or coming out and for some of these ballot questions, I think all 3 are going to fail. We had Sean Oliver call in, say he was going to vote in favor of the ballot question for the 4-year, 2-year term, but he was going to vote against the other 2. He was going to vote against the ballot question asking people if they want to repeal the CPA, and he was going to go vote against the ballot question of rent control, rent stabilization, whatever you want to call it. He was going to vote against that. He had voted against it at the outset. That was actually his very first meeting. And so I think all 3 of them are going to fail. We're probably going to hear some speeches on the floor about this. I imagine Council Burgo will have a lot to say about the rent stabilization question, because that's something that he proposed originally and he had fought for. He's fighting for, and I think that the I don't know what we'll hear on the other 2 questions. I think it was Brian Gomes who brought the mayoral term question forward, and the CPA question was brought by Council President Morad. The CPA question, I can say with absolute certainty, that one is DOA. Just based on the conversations that have been public, and some of them I've had off air with city councilors, that question is not going to pass. I would be shocked. It would mean like 3 or 4 people changed their minds fairly recently if that question ends up on the ballot. The rent control, the 4-year mayoral term, based on my count, if you've got Councillor Lima against it, Councillor Giesta against it, Councillor Abreu against it, that's 3. I think there are some, that's 3. You can only have 3 councillors vote against it to sustain that veto. To override that veto. So 1 councillor flipping the other way is going to keep that question off the ballot, because you need a supermajority for a veto override. Much like Congress needs a 2/3 majority, the city council needs a supermajority as well. So I think all 3 of those questions are going to be dead. The one that I'm less sure of is the rent stabilization question, because publicly I know that there are 3 councillors that have come out against that rent stabilization ballot question. It is Councillor Lima, who came out with a press release today, Councillor Abreu, who was against the question at the outset, Councillor Oliver, who was against the question at the outset, the new Ward 3 city councillor. So we'll I think that there is going to be at least one more that's going to peel off of that, but I'm less certain about that. So we'll see. There is a big rally outside, apparently 50 to 60 people, that was organized by local community activists. I don't know what conversations may have been had in the interim between the time that I've spoken with some of these councilors, or some of these councilors have been on the air, and the time that the vote is going to be taken, which it may be taken right now. But 508-996-0500. We'll get some updates from Adam Bass as well. He's going to be probably calling in at certain points throughout the show, and he's going to be calling in at certain points throughout the show. And if he's able to get back into the studio in time, depending on what time the meeting ends, we'll see if we can get him in studio to talk a little bit about the meeting. And of course, he's going to get right on that article that'll be out on WBSM.com. So after the meeting, Adam Bass works very quickly to get that stuff out there for you to read. So you want to be checking later tonight, WBSM.com. You can check WBSM.com today, right now, actually, for some good stories that we have. I wrote a couple yesterday. One of them was on Governor Maura Healey and Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll's visit to Fall River to tour local businesses and host a business roundtable at the new Creative Class building in Fall River. That Creative Class building is actually very interesting because it fulfills a housing need, which is obviously a big need in Fall River as well. And it also reserves studio space for local artists and entrepreneurial space because they have the groundwork co-working space, which was, I believe, pioneered in New Bedford. There is a groundwork in New Bedford too, and there's one in Fall River. They're very nice spaces. They're very cool. I've been to them. They're very cool, and I think good spaces for people who need an area to work that's peaceful and accommodating. That may not necessarily yet be able to afford or need a full-time dedicated single space. So you definitely want to check that out. And also a visit by New Bedford police officers, Lieutenant Scott Carolla and Officer Manny Segura, to the Spectrum Productions, Inc., which is a nonprofit community. It's a nonprofit community theater group for performers with autism. That I'm actually the president of that organization. But they came to visit the performers with their two patrol cars. They're two specialized patrol cars. One is the autism awareness car, which is really cool, and the other is they just unveiled as the suicide awareness patrol car. They're very cool. They look cool. They send a nice message, and you can check out that story. You can see pictures of the car. You can see pictures of the performers hanging out at the car. Some of the pictures of the performers doing a rehearsal of their production Shrek, which will be a local community theater production that'll be put on sometime early next year that they're practicing for now. So that's all there on WBSM.com that you can check out. And what we'll do, I think, is take a break. We'll see if we can get some updates on some things. We might not be able to. We might not be able to. We will see. We'll see. But if you want to join in the conversation, if you want to send us a call, give us a call at 508-996-0500, or if you want to send us an app chat on the WBSM app. Let us know what you think about some of the stuff that's been going on. We can talk about anything you'd like. We could talk about, the jail standoff. Talk about the jail. You could talk about the jail standoff. We could talk about that happened last week. We could talk about, the sheriff's office, this new ruling that came down in Mass from the SJC with Mass Lawyers Weekly that I'll attempt to I'll check out. Mass Lawyers Weekly is a magazine. I used to see it in our when I was at UMass Law over here in Dartmouth. I used to see it in the library. Used to peruse it, actually browse it. Peruse usually I think has become to mean browse, but it actually means to study very carefully. So I went to, I've browsed it a few times, and I'll check out the Mass Lawyers Weekly article. But before then, I'll take your calls at 508-996-0500. We'll take your app chat messages on the WBSM app chat. Again, very exciting. We're going to get some news on we're going to get some live updates on the city council meeting where those ballot questions that have been the subject of much discussion throughout the last month are being put up to a vote for a veto override, trying to override Mayor Mitchell's veto. So some have phrased it as a standoff between Mayor Mitchell and City Council President Morad, and we'll see. But until then, I'm going to take a break, and we'll take your calls at 508-996-0500. We'll take your messages on the WBSM app. So stay tuned. This is South Coast Tonight. I'm going to take a break. Welcome back to the show. I'm Marcus, 508-996-0500. That's how you can join us this evening. We'll also take your messages on the app chat. So I did get a chance to just briefly look at the article. I can give you the gist of the issue without there's a little bit of legal stuff that I'd have to just look at, just read before I can get into a really in-depth conversation about it. But I did get a app chat from Meaty in Westport, and saying now it's a, quote, standoff, ha, ha, ha. Well, so, sure, you want to, I'm guessing You can use the term riot. It's fine. It's just a matter of, I guess it's just a matter of branding, how you want to brand it. I know the sheriff had an objection to the term riot. I believe going forward, WBSM's phrasing of this incident is standoff incident. I believe other media outlets have also said standoff incident with respect to this. I frankly think if you want to say riot, I don't think that's really super off base, or I don't think it's, a malapropriism. I don't think it's a ridiculous misuse of the word riot, I should say. But because riot, is basically like a violent act to disturb, the peace, more or less. Rough definition. That's more or less accurate, though. And there wasn't, and I think what the sheriff was saying in this particular circumstances, there wasn't any personal violence. Like there wasn't any violence from one person to another. There wasn't a single person who was seriously injured or maybe even injured at all. There wasn't, and nobody had to go to the hospital. So that, I think, maybe the term riot might be a little bit too incendiary, but I think if you want to use the term riot, it's fine. Standoff, I think it's fine. I think you could just use whatever word you want. It's just a matter of which type of branding you prefer. I like the term standoff. I'll continue to use the term standoff, but if you want to say riot, I'm not going to say, well, no, it wasn't a riot. It was a standoff. Because, like I said, I think it's just a matter of branding, and using what word that you think is appropriate, because it's all very subjective. It's all very subjective. So, Meaty from Westport, if you'd like to use the word riot, go ahead. I appreciate the app chat. We'll take more app chats at 508-996-0500. We got another app chat from a New Bedford resident asking how many votes the city council needs to sustain the vetoes. Again, they need 8. To override the vetoes, they need 8 votes. 8. So that's a high bar. So that means only 3 councilors could vote against it in order for the override to happen. If it's 4, the veto is sustained. Let's go to the phones. Good evening. Hello.
Hi, Marcus.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, maybe it wasn't a riot. Maybe it was an insurrection.
Well, I don't know if it was an insurrection, because I don't think anybody was there trying to plot the removal of the sheriff from the office or any type of regime change. But I don't know if that. I think that might be a little bit of a stretch.
You know what really got me when I heard the present sheriff, say that they negotiated with the rioters. Who ever heard of negotiating with prisoners?
Well, I think so. The situation was they'd had a list of demands and like things that they wanted, right? And I don't think he said like, oh, we're going to give you this stuff, we're going to give you that stuff. I think it was just responding to those demands. Like they said they wanted more programming. He's actually implementing more programming, right? They said they wanted more TVs. And he said, no, you can't get more TVs because you just destroyed the TVs in your cell. So I don't know if it was a negotiation as so much as it was like sort of a tactic to sort of cool tensions a little bit. But he did say as soon as he handed him the piece of paper with the response to the demands, they ripped it up. They weren't interested in it.
Yeah, the sheriff shouldn't have even thought of negotiating with the prisoners. I mean, who's in charge, the prisoners or the sheriff? There's no back and forth negotiations. That's crazy.
Well, at the end of the day, I think, all of the inmates that were in those units were peacefully subdued, and the 20 or so that were the instigators were sent off to other places and criminally charged. So it seems as though, I think the sheriff has, very clearly established that he's in charge in the end result.
But Marcus, when these 20 prisoners, the instigators, the ringleaders, are sent to other facilities, don't you think they'll be looked upon as heroes?
It's common to if there's an incident, like somebody's criminally charged with a specific incident in a house of correction, it's not uncommon to send them to other places because, it just seems like if there's a particular incident, it's probably the best case scenario for both the correction officer and the defendant to be elsewhere. I've had defendants that have been accused of doing stuff in the jail to correctional officers and stuff. And so we've always, I've always made a point to have them have them held elsewhere or be sentenced. If they can't be held elsewhere, be sentenced elsewhere because might be a little bit too much history between the correctional officers and the inmates for that to be a workable situation for both of them.
Right, but say you send one of those prisoners, say you send them to Illinois or
Yeah, more likely Norfolk or Suffolk County, Plymouth County. Probably
they'll be looked upon as heroes, right? They went against the sheriff and they got transferred. So, hey, why don't we try it here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're going to spend more time in prison now, most likely, if there's evidence that they've, destroyed hundreds of thousands of dollars of property in the house of correction. They're going to get criminally charged. So and I think all of them that were moved were actually awaiting trial. So none of them were being sentenced yet. So, even if they get acquitted of the thing they're being accused of, you can tack on some more time on their sentence for whatever they've done.
Don't really care.
Some people might. Some people might not care. Some people might not care. Some people do. I mean, if you're only going to serve, if you're awaiting trial for a crime that's likely going to get you 6 months or maybe even get you maybe it's a case that you'll get acquitted on, and then you've got to do a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 2.5 for what for a stupid incident that some stupid behavior that you had on one particular day in the jail. I think a lot of people would care about that, especially
somebody facing 20 years. What's another year and a half? And
if someone's facing 20, if someone's facing 20 years, maybe they might not get sentenced to 20 years. Yeah, sure. There was 3 people that were on trial for murder, and I don't know if it was first-degree murder, which is life without parole, or second-degree murder, which is a possibility of parole and 15 to 25 years or something like that. That you could, I guess, come to that conclusion, but the overwhelming majority of people that are in houses of correction are not facing 20 years.
Yeah. Okay. Great show, Marcus.
Thanks.
As always.
I appreciate the call. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
508-996-0500. So it looks like, just again, a cursory look at that Mass Lawyers Weekly article. It looks like, what they have found was a lawsuit against the Bristol County Sheriff's Office for a particular suicide that appeared to happen, I believe, in 2014 can go forward. That was a Superior Court ruling that it can go forward. So I don't know if there was a motion for summary judgment or something, or a motion to dismiss by the states on that matter. Yeah. So it's basically, the question was whether or not, the question in this particular ruling was whether or not the sheriff's office could actually be sued for negligence, the estate of the detainee, right? Because, or the inmate, because she's since passed. Obviously, she committed suicide. But could the estate of somebody in pretrial detention who hanged herself while in solitary confinement bring a negligence action against the Commonwealth and against the Bristol County Sheriff's Office? And so what they said was, in Suffolk Superior Court, they said they can. There was an immunity clause. There's an immunity clause that allows state workers or state departments or public institutions certain liability protections in the interest of allowing them to do their job effectively, right? Without without being overburdened, basically, by the worry of being sued. But they're saying they pierced that veil for one reason or another, that they apparently that there was an institutional failure here that would allow a lawsuit to go forward for negligence. So they're saying that this case can't be, there's a legal question that has to be answered here. And so I think that's basically what it is. The case is called Prado v. Hodgson et al. Et al. Means like other defendants, basically. So it's Prado v. Hodgson et al. So they're allowing the lawsuit to proceed. So there hasn't been a ruling on that lawsuit yet. But they're saying basically it can't be dismissed. You can't dismiss it. There's a lawsuit here to be adjudicated. It's just a matter of how it'll be adjudicated. There is a legal question that needs to be answered here. So that's basically the gist of it. I'll have to go a little bit more in depth and read because it's a little bit, there's facts and there's legal stuff that I just have to read through that just so I can familiarize myself with the story, more completely and comprehensively. So I can give a better explanation. But that's more or less the issue here. It was the lawsuit. They're saying the lawsuit can't go forward. So it looks like the state tried to dismiss the lawsuit, saying that, based on, the immunities that are given to them under the law as a state institution, means that they can't be sued for this particular circumstance. But what the Superior Court judge says is, no, this doesn't apply here because you did this. So there is a question of negligence here. And negligence is negligence is like the foundation for any civil liability lawsuit. Was there a duty? Is there a breach of that duty? The proximate was that breach the proximate cause of the plaintiff's harm, and are there damages? So that's basically the elements of negligence. Professor Peltz will be proud of me for pulling that out of my first year law school, my 1L law school lessons. So I got to take a break. We'll be right back. 508-996-0500.
1420 WBSM, New Bedford's News Talk Station. WBSM isn't just a broadcast. It's also a podcast. Get all of our podcasts at WBSM.com, the WBSM app, or just search WBSM on your favorite podcast provider.
Hey, welcome back to the show. I'm Marcus Farrow, 508-996-0500. I'm getting updates in the city council chambers from our City Hall reporter Adam Bass, and he is telling us based on the comments that are made on the council floor so far, speaking on the issue, he believes the rent stabilization ballot question. So this is the ballot question to ask residents whether or not the city should pass a rent stabilization ordinance. He believes it's about to die. So he said that there's 4 people who have spoken out against it. He said Councilor Oliver, Councilor Markey, Councilor Lima. City Councilor at large Ian Abreu, who's always been against it. Councilor Oliver, who's always been against it. Councilor Lima, who came out today and issued a press release saying he's against the rent stabilization ballot question. And Councilor Brad Markey of Ward 1, who I'm not sure had made any public statements. I had spoken with him recently. He said he was against it. So looks like that is about to go down. So Adam's going to give us more updates. There's more people speaking. He thinks there might be another counselor who may end up coming out against it. So if there's 4 votes, it's dead. That question doesn't go forward. So, we'll see how the conversation on housing moves forward after that, or on that particular issue. So that looks like the state of the situation right now. And so we're going to continue to keep you updated. And, 6-5. Okay, so The Adam Bass has said New Bedford City Council sustains Mayor John Mitchell's veto 6-5. Councilor at Large Ian Abreu, Ward 3 City Councilor Sean Oliver, Councilor at Large Naomi Carney, Ward 5 City Councilor Scott Lima, and Ward 1 City Councilor Brad Markey voted no. So 6-5. They sustain the Mitchell's veto. They sustained Mitchell's veto. So that is, Abreu, Oliver, Carney, Lima, Markey. So there were 6 councilors that voted in favor of it. There were 5 that voted against it, but only 3 could have voted against it. You needed a supermajority to clear that hurdle of overriding the Mitchell's veto, and they were short of that supermajority by 2 votes. So 5 councilors were against it, 6-5. So pretty close call there. So 508-996-0500. Yep. So rent stabilization fails 6-5. So Abreu, Markey, Lima, Naomi. So Councilor at Large, again, the councilors that voted against it to sustain Mitchell's veto, because only 3 of them could have, the veto override to happen, only 3 of them could vote against it. Any more than three, Mitchell's veto sustained, the ballot question fails. So, Councilor at Large Ian Abreu, Ward 1 City Councilor Brad Markey, Ward 5 Councilor Scott Lima, Councilor at Large Naomi Carney, and Ward 3 Councilor Sean Oliver. So that question is not going to appear on the New Bedford city ballot in this year in 2023. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. 2 more questions up, and Adam Bass is going to give us those updates. Good evening. Welcome back to South Coast Tonight. I'm Marcus Farrow. We're tracking the city council meeting where the 3 ballot questions are up try to override Mitchell's veto. The rent stabilization ballot question asking that would purport to ask city residents whether or not the city should pass a rent control ordinance. That has failed. It will not appear on the ballot in 2023 in the New Bedford city ballot. 5 councilors have voted against it. Only 3 could have voted against it to override Mitchell's veto. You needed an 8-3 vote at the very least to override Mitchell's veto. Ended up being a 6-5 vote. Councilors Abreu, City Councilor at Large Ian Abreu, Ward 1 City Councilor Brad Markey, Ward 3 City Councilor Sean Oliver, Ward 5 City Councilor Scott Lima, Councilor at Large Naomi Carney, all voted against the rent stabilization ballot question. It will not appear on the ballot. So, still 2 more questions. We're hearing that someone's saying not nice things about media again. That's okay, but we'll figure all that out after some of the commentary. After I'm really focused now on the ballot question. I'm focused on the ballot, whether or not those ballot questions make it on the ballot or they don't, and then we'll figure out who's saying what about whom afterwards. I'm hearing there's some negative comments about members of the media. Okay, and that's fine. We're here. We can get criticized. It's not a big deal. But I'm more interested to see how the questions will pass or not pass. I think, that was the one I actually thought had a chance. The other 2, I am very skeptical of them passing. I don't think they're going to. I'd be surprised if they do. The asking voters whether or not they want to gut the CPA and asking voters whether or not they want to change the 4-year term back to a 2-year term. I think those are DOA as well. So we're going to get live updates. We got Adam Bass in city council chambers, giving us live updates. I've got people in the chambers as well giving me live updates too. So we've got people on the ground getting the information from the council chambers over to the airwaves, straight to you guys. So you want to stay tuned.